Well, from that, we dive back into our interview with Fred Mburu, the CEO of Apollo Group. Before we took those two developing stories, we were talking about money market funds, if I'm not wrong, Fred.
Yes, we were.
Maybe you can carry on.
Yeah, I think money market fund, again, the same concept. It is a unitized fund.
Yes.
Investing predominantly in instruments that carry an interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think the beauty about the money market fund is that you do not have an obligation to stay invested, so you are benefiting from current interest rates. In the Apollo Money Market Fund, we will be declaring the interest rate on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
And then on a monthly basis, you do have the accumulated interest that has been accrued by the fund.
How are the interest rates looking up currently?
I think we're going through some very interesting time. I think if you cast our minds back to last year, we saw a very sharp rise towards the mid of last year. Then again, a very sharp drop sometime in October, November.
Mm-hmm.
We are now back to an increase. The trajectory is looking upwards. So it is a good time for those who are looking to participate in that increase in interest rate to invest in the Apollo Money Market Fund, because you will benefit from what's happening around interest rates.
What are the return on investments looking like?
On the money market fund, target will be anything between 13-15% per annum on a money market fund. Again, a lot of this interest rate is determined by what's happening around us in terms of the interest market.
Correct.
So at the moment, it will be anything in between 13 and 15% per annum.
And Fred, if you look at the current macroeconomic environment, we've seen a number of analysts indicating that economic growth will be above 5%. I don't know, what are your thoughts around this?
Our thoughts at Apollo is that, we share the sentiment in terms of the prospect. And I think you just need to look back at the policy reform that has happened over the years, what's happening around government investments in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah.
We think all these are the right pillars, to propel us to economic growth. So we are very constructive. We're very optimistic that 2016 will be better than 2015. We even think even the years ahead should be a lot stronger.
Are you worried that we are in a year that precedes the election? Might this see investor sentiment sort of take on a wait-and-see kind of approach?
I think traditionally we have seen that that fear in terms of when do I make my investment proposition, especially during an election, a pre-election period.
Yeah.
But I think one has to look beyond that. I think you have to look beyond the fear and look at the fundamentals.
Yeah.
I think all the signals show us that there's no better time than to be making that investment. So you really need to look at the fundamentals, look beyond the fear, look above the noise, listen to the indicators well above the noise. Sometimes we get a bit crowded by the noise and makes us fearful. But I think for long-term investors, there could not be a better time to invest.
I like that. There could not be a better time. Well, Fred, the other thing I'm keen on finding out is, at Apollo, I know you do have the private pension plans. And looking at this, when it comes to Kenyans taking up pension schemes, as a country, we've not been doing pretty well on that front. Perhaps give us your outlook in terms of the statistics we might have regarding how the uptake has been.
Yeah. Thank you, Abi. I think, that's an interesting topic. I think the reality is that coverage for pension is low in this country for several reasons. I think information gap, people not really appreciating why they should take pension plans. We have seen some initiatives by NSSF to sort of have some universal coverage. But I think over and above that, it's important that we take retirement and pension planning and pension savings into our own hands. So at Apollo Group, through our life insurance business, we do have a personal pension plan product that any individual can come and subscribe to. Over and above that, we also do corporate business. We do have also umbrella funds, segregated funds. So there is a huge scope and huge opportunities and to tap into the whole savings and retirement space.
I'd like to invite your views on, if you look at the trends, one of the biggest hurdles that has faced a number of companies that are in the line of business you are in has been aspects around fraud when it comes to people making fraudulent claims. Other than that, we've also seen a majority of people having this perception about insurance companies and insurance service providers that in the event you have a claim, it takes like forever for you to get your claim through. How true is this?
It's both a perception and a reality, I guess, to some extent. I think a lot of us in the industry probably do not have a very good name. I think at Apollo Group, we pride ourselves. We, in fact, last year won an award in terms of fraud and detection. I think fraud is something we have to live with. It's something that we can only get better in terms of trying to manage the risk of fraud. As an industry, obviously, we do also have some way to go around fraud and detection. I think the reality is that insurance is an important part of, of our basic needs as a population. I think we all need to appreciate the need for, a life insurance, an asset cover, because it is during that time when you run into problems that you will appreciate the need for a cover. I think at APA, you will recall last year but one, we paid a very huge claim, about 1.9 billion shillings for JKIA Airport.
Yeah.
We are giving confidence to the market that yes, insurance is real, it is a legitimate business. We do meet our promise at APA in terms of paying our claims.
But the reality on the ground has been, when it comes to the big corporates, their issues are tackled pretty fast compared to the small kind of SME. How do you tackle this?
I think it's an information gap as well. I think we treat all claims that are legitimate as payable, so we do not have sort of preferential. I think the gap really is around, what are the requirements and what is the process before a claim is made. So as long as the processes and the requirements have been met, then a claim which is payable does get paid at APA and Apollo Group.
And finally, on matters to do with insurance, we're talking about a penetration rate of about 3 to 4% here in Kenya. Just our next door neighbor in South Africa, they are hitting close to 15% penetration. What's the issue with the Kenyan population when it comes to uptake?
I think to compare Kenya, South Africa is probably a bit too ambitious. I think South Africa, probably a very different market, and probably does not compare to any other market and in Africa. So there are a couple of issues South Africa has benefited from. I think they've got a cultural issue in terms of, appreciation for insurance. That means that we also do have, huge scope and potential in Kenya and the rest of Africa in terms of insurance and penetration. So same thing as investments and savings. So it's about accessibility, it's about transparency in terms of the products that you're assessing and that you're selling, and it's also about affordability. So as we move down, the scale and, address the mass market, then we need to be more innovative in terms of the products and the accessibility that we offer that segment of the population. So we aspire to be like South Africa at some point. I think the current penetration levels of 3.1% are really minuscule, and that just show us that there's a lot of scope.
Okay. And Fred, I'd like to take you back to your thoughts that you did indicate that 2016 looks a bit promising. We've seen a couple of fund managers who are not quite optimistic about 2016. Perhaps, would you want to give us your views on this as well?
Yeah, our optimism is around, fundamentals. And I think, as I said earlier, we look beyond the headlines and we look beyond the noise. I think when we analyze the detail of the fundamentals, the reform that has happened, the investment that is going on, the foreign direct investment that is coming into the country, just a perception about Kenya and Africa, I think we see those, as indicators that yes, we will be doing well. There will be some disruptions. Obviously, what happens around the globe does have an impact on, on emerging markets such as ours, whatever happens in China, the increase in the US Fed rate. Those will be issues, but I think those will be side issues. And as long as we've got, a strong domestic market, Kenya's market, for example, as you know, is not reliant on commodities like a lot of African markets. So we do think that, the soft and commodities that we export, will be key drivers for growth. The infrastructure that is being put in place will also drive growth into the future.
And on one hand, I do agree with you, Fred. On the other hand, we've seen some other key developments. For example, we're seeing the Kenya shilling is under severe stress, now trading at about 102.27. We've also seen a hike in the interest rates. Perhaps do you feel as well as you've talked about the fundamentals, we also look at the other side of the coin as well?
I think on the exchange rate, yes, we have gone through a period of depreciation, but let's put this in perspective. I think the reasons for this are probably not limited to domestic issues. It's what's happening around the globe. And if you look at this in the context of also, our peers, other African countries, look at what has happened to Zambia, look at what has happened to the Ghana and currency. Nigeria probably a little bit peculiar in the sense that, there is some sort of government control in terms of, what level of depreciation. So I think we have done well under the circumstances. I think depreciation has happened right across most emerging markets, and we are not immune to what's happening around us. In terms of domestic debt, yes, there is pressure on the government, very ambitious budgets.
Correct.
And the reality is that there is nothing wrong with debt. I think what is wrong is if that debt is not being put to productive use. I think the moment you've got a heavy bias towards recurrent expenditure, so you're borrowing to finance recurrent expenditure, then there lies the problem. But as long as this debt is being applied towards development expenditure, then that is a platform for future revenue generation for economic expansion.
Because the other key aspect coming in from experts is that export growth hasn't been coming through really, whereas we are seeing a lot of expenditure from government side.
Yes, that's indeed incorrect. I think what that talks to is now the sustainability of the foreign component of our debt and borrowing. So yes, we really need to ramp up our export growth so that we've got sufficient foreign exchange revenues coming in to service our requirements in terms of imports.
Many thanks. Perhaps we'd like to get your parting shot. What should we expect from Apollo in 2016 in terms of new products as well as a business strategy?
I think from Apollo Asset Management, these are exciting times, and for us, we believe we are coming to the market with a retail investment product at the right time. Stock markets are presenting a good opportunity for entry. What's happening around interest rates is a good opportunity for those who've got monies in their savings account to then direct them towards the Apollo money market fund. So we are optimistic. We are very bullish about the future. As a business, I think we're looking to grow. I think my parting shot will be around investors looking out for what we'll be selling in the very near future. And I think just to give you a flavor of that, they should look out for bananas, tomatoes, and melons.
Interesting. That's a good place to end this interesting conversation.
Thank you.
We've been speaking there to Fred Mburu, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Apollo Group, and sharing with us interesting perspectives around what kind of investment options do you and me have when it comes to having that extra coin for a rainy day, as well as having a good return on your investment. We've been speaking to him. Of course, we didn't have much time to get to the social media feedback, but let's keep the conversation going. My name is Abia Gina. Thank you for keeping it KTN Business Today.